The Obama administration prepares to hand over the reins to Donald Trump. It has been keen to point out its successes over the last 8 years, although some of the claims made are being questioned.
On the way out, the Obama administration is tallying its achievements. Here are a few, according to Secretary of State John Kerry.
Iran nuclear agreement, which is a demonstration, quite simply, of the power of diplomacy to be able to address major international problems short of war. And the result is that we now have the world on our side.
An American naval ship fired warning shots at Iranian vessels yesterday. The latest escalation in the increasingly dangerous game of chicken Iran seems to be playing with U.S. ships in the region.
At 8 a.m. local time Sunday morning, 4 Iranian fast boats traveling at high speed came within 900 yards of the USS Mahan. That's when the U.S. Navy destroyer was forced to fire 3 warning shots at the approaching Iranian boats. The Mahan fired 50 caliber bullets in the direction of the 4 vessels, whose sailors, we now know, were manning their weapons. The U.S. guided missile destroyer was escorting 2 U.S. warships into the Strait of Hormuz, a Marine amphibious landing ship with 1,000 U.S. Marines on board, and a Navy oil tanker. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has been conducting an annual exercise in the Strait of Hormuz, simulating maneuvers to shut down the entrance to the Gulf, where much of the world's oil passes each day. That exercise is ongoing. Right now, there are no U.S. aircraft carriers in the Middle East. The USS George H.W. Bush has been delayed in the shipyards by 6 months due to sequestration budget cuts. Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, wrote to the head of the Navy late last week, quote, "The absence of an aircraft carrier harms our force projection capabilities and limits some of our military's flexibility to quickly respond to any number of unforeseen events that may arise." Unforeseen events like an increase in ballistic missile tests that Iran has conducted several times since the signing of the nuclear deal. UN Security Council resolutions have done nothing to halt Iran's missile tests or ongoing proliferation of weapons.
The Iranian parliament has approved a bill to increase the country's defense spending to 5% of the country's total budget. 173 lawmakers voted in favor of the measure. Legislation includes expanding Iran's missile capabilities and calls for strengthening the air defense power within short, medium, and long ranges. The bill also requires the government to strengthen Iran's electronic warfare and cyber defense capabilities and demands Iran's navy to be further developed. Lawmakers said the measure is necessary to preserve Iran's national security and interests and to fight terrorist groups. Legislation is part of the nation's 6th economic development plan. Iran has managed to considerably enhance its defense capabilities. Tehran has always declared that its military might poses no threat to regional countries.
Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has reportedly sent a letter to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump demanding him not move the American embassy to Jerusalem al-Quds. Abbas warned that such a move will have a, quote, disastrous impact on the so-called Middle East peace process and the two-state solution, as well as regional stability and security. Abbas also sent letters to other world powers, including Russia, China, and the European Union, urging them to spare no effort to prevent the U.S. from moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Al-Quds.
Frightening moments for hundreds of children at the Albert Jewish Community Center in southwest Miami-Dade as a false bomb threat leads to an evacuation.
I think that this is something really serious, and it's kind of scary.
I don't like it. I don't think anyone appreciates it because it scares people and you don't really know whether it's real or not.
Miami-Dade Police and Fire Rescue responded to the community center at Southwest 112th Avenue and 111th Street. Frightened parents rushed there to check up on their children.
Imagine I have 2 kids here, so it's, your heart kind of sinks when you're seeing the helicopters, and as you get closer, you realize it's above their school.
There were similar concerns at the Jewish Community Center on Pine Tree Drive on Miami Beach, which also received a bomb threat by telephone. Some 300 youngsters were evacuated on Miami Beach.
I think it's a shame. It's too bad America is just so vulnerable. And it's sad.
Similar bomb threats were received nationwide at Jewish community centers in other states, including New Jersey, South Carolina, Maryland, Delaware, and Tennessee. The Jewish Press website also says Jewish centers in London were threatened. The Anti-Defamation League says the number of threats is alarming.
This is a lot at one time. There were a number of threats in January of 2016, interestingly, but not as many as we're seeing right now.
Rabbi Yossi Harlig, a community leader in the Kendall area, says the threats will make the Jewish community more alert.
Local authorities tell us that the FBI is investigating the source of the threat and that they are also coordinating with the other investigations taking place throughout the country.
Russia has strongly criticized the U.S. over its repeated claims that Moscow interfered in the 2016 American presidential election. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the accusation as, quote, baseless and amateurish. Peskov denied any role by Russian officials or official government agencies in hacking attacks in the U.S. The Kremlin spokesman said that Russia is growing tired of denying involvement in the U.S. election.
We still don't know what data is held and relied on when it comes to unfounded accusations. We continue to strongly reject any involvement of Moscow and accusations that Russian officials or institutions were involved in hacking attacks. We are observing a serious fatigue with these accusations. It's reminiscent of a witch hunt.
The response is the first of its nature by the Kremlin following the publication of a report earlier this month by the U.S. intelligence community assessing Russian activity in the November election.
Now, the frenzy surrounding Russian hackers allegedly meddling in other countries' internal affairs has reached Europe. France and Germany, which have major elections this year, are painted as the top targets by media there. In fact, these are just some of the headlines we saw over the weekend. One of the most recent attacks that Russian hackers supposedly carried out targeted the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. Its IT system was breached and security compromised. Some media immediately pointed the finger at Russia, citing unnamed sources and intelligence agencies. The OSCE itself, though, confirmed the attack but said it didn't have the resources to investigate who is behind it. The watchdog also said Russian involvement was mere speculation. Maximilian Krah from Germany's AfD party says that stories like this one actually only fuel anti-Russian rhetoric.
That's something which makes me very angry, because this is indeed now a fake news trend to create Russophobia and to use it for political benefit.
Meanwhile, Europe is now preparing to counter a perceived Russian military threat. NATO countries in the east of the continent are waiting for the arrival of thousands of American soldiers as part of a US-led battle group.
Remember, we spent almost 2 decades hugging the bear. Now we need to be able to react to a revanchist Russia that puts force back on the table.
It's clearly an escalation that involves numerous facets, including propaganda about Russian crimes in the U.S. media that includes shipping troops and equipment to the border, that includes expanding NATO and pushing hard on other NATO members to join in this escalation. I think there is, starting from Washington, D.C., a major push to do everything possible in the next 2 weeks to create unending hostility between the West and Russia that can't be undone by Donald Trump or anyone else.
The nuclear-capable Babur 3 was fired from an underwater mobile platform in the Indian Ocean and successfully hit its flag target. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif congratulated the nation and military forces on its first successful launch. He also said that Pakistan always maintains a policy of peaceful coexistence and that this test is a step towards reinforcing policy of credible minimum deterrence. The Babur 3 is a sea-based variant of the ground-launched Babur 2 missile, which was tested in December.
Korean military officials said Tuesday 10 Chinese military planes have been spotted entering the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone several times from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Korea time. The planes included 6 strategic bombers and early warning aircraft. A spokesperson for Korea's Ministry of Defense noted that lone Chinese bombers repeatedly violated the zone last year, but said that the instance on Monday was noteworthy because it is rare for multiple aircraft to cross into the zone. The planes made multiple passes into the zone near Yeodo, a submerged rock located off the southern coast of Jeju Island, and went through the Korea Strait into Tsushima Strait in Japan, before returning to China via the East China Sea. A military official said South Korea reacted to the incursion by sending roughly 10 fighter jets, including F-15Ks and KF-16s, to the area, which reportedly sent warning signals to the Chinese planes. The South Korean Air Force also delivered warning messages to its Chinese counterpart. China has reportedly explained its actions by saying the flights were part of a military drill in its own air defense identification zone, which it unilaterally declared in November of 2013, and which overlaps with Korea's and Japan's. But there are some experts who interpret the action as China's way of expressing its discontent with Korea's decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system to the Korean peninsula, as well as its dissatisfaction with its control over parts of the East China Sea and developments in the military coalitions between South Korea, Japan, and the United States.
Senator Ted Cruz and other Republicans met with Taiwan's president on Sunday, adding tension to U.S.-Chinese relations. According to Cruz, the Chinese consulate asked members of Congress not to meet with President Tsai Ing-wen as she traveled through the U.S. But Cruz sat down with the Taiwanese leader anyway, adding China doesn't give the U.S. veto power over meetings involving its leaders. China has long claimed control over Taiwan through its One China policy, even though the island has held its own democratic elections for decades. Unsurprisingly, China condemned the meeting, as it did when President-elect Donald Trump spoke with Tsai over the phone last month. After that call, Trump caused a stir when he said he didn't understand why the U.S. should be bound to that policy.
I don't want China dictating to me.
The U.S. is not necessarily bound by the One China policy, but historically we've agreed not to meddle in China's relationship with Taiwan. Trump is the first U.S. president in decades to have contact with the Taiwanese leader, as far as the public knows. A Chinese state-run newspaper claimed Sunday that if the Trump administration went against the One China policy, China's citizens would demand revenge against the U.S.
Of course, we are ready, and we know that our delegation to that conference is ready to go when they define, when they set the time of that conference. We are ready to negotiate everything. But who's going to be there from the other side, we don't know yet. Is it going to be real Syrian opposition? When I say real, it means has a grassroots in Syria, not the Saudi one or French one or British one. It should be a Syrian opposition to discuss the Syrian issues. So the viability, or let's say the success of that conference, will depend on that point.
Proposed negotiations are expected to take place later this month, when representatives from Syria's opposition in attendance. This comes as a national ceasefire brokered by Russia and Turkey is in place, which excludes terrorist groups like Daesh and Nusra Front. The Syrian leader has accused foreign-backed militants of violating the ceasefire. Assad has also vowed to flush terrorists out of an area near Damascus.
On Monday, leaders from both sides of the ethnically divided country of Cyprus began new unification talks, a move which the country's UN envoy said may end one of Europe's most enduring conflicts. Dozens of disagreements caused by the conflict stemming from the 1974 division of the Mediterranean island will be the focus of the week-long consultations in Geneva. Turkish Cypriot leader Mustafa Akinci and Greek Cypriot President Nikos Anastasiades hope to come together to find a way to handle property disputes that have gone on for more than 40 years. As several part reconciliation efforts have failed, both leaders have attempted to cool expectations of a quick fix.
Just as produce sellers were unloading their stalls at this bustling market on Sunday morning, this car exploded, the latest in a string of deadly bombings over the past week in Baghdad.
This market has been a frequent target of bombing, yet there is no patrol and no checkpoint. If people go out, they'll be killed, and if they stay home, they'll die of hunger.
According to the Iraqi Interior Ministry, a security officer spotted the bomber as he drove into the market and shot at him, but failed to prevent the detonation. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the attack, saying the bomber was targeting Shiites. The market was located in a Shiite district of the city.
And at least 8 police officers have been killed and a dozen wounded in a car bomb attack in Egypt. Police say a suicide bomber drove into a security checkpoint in the city of Al Arish in northern Sinai. They say the attacker used a stolen street cleaning vehicle packed with explosive.
We begin with the urgent scene unfolding in Orlando at this hour. Authorities say there is a desperate manhunt for a cop killer. A veteran police officer, a mother, she was trying to apprehend him at a Walmart. Investigators say he shot and killed her. Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton, 17 years on the force, beloved by her community. Her fellow officers standing in salute as her coffin was taken from the hospital. And we would also learn a second officer was killed in the hunt for the killer. Tonight, the reward, a community on edge and schools on lockdown.
Tonight, a massive manhunt. Police going door to door at this apartment complex, searching for the man police say gunned down one of Orlando's finest.
We're going to bring this dirtbag to justice.
Just after 7 a.m., Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton, a 17-year veteran, is on duty outside this Walmart when someone alerts her that a wanted murder suspect named Markeith Lloyd is in the store.
There was a short foot pursuit, and as soon as she said stop, he basically opened fire.
He had a security vest on and everything. I heard her tell him to stop or whatever. He shot her. He shot her down, and he took off running.
29 District 3, we have one officer shot en route to Orm.
Clayton later dying at the hospital, the suspect getting away, firing on one deputy's car, carjacking another. Another deputy killed in a motorcycle crash while searching for the suspect. Schools put on lockdown as SWAT teams swarmed that apartment complex. Police scouring Lloyd's Facebook page for clues after he was suspected in the shooting death of his pregnant girlfriend last month, posting this 2 weeks earlier, goals to be on America's Most Wanted.
Markeith Lloyd needs to turn himself in. Not tonight, not tomorrow. He needs to call and turn himself in now.
Monday, an asteroid, roughly the size of the one that blew out windows across a Russian city when it impacted with the atmosphere in 2013, buzzed Earth Monday morning. Asteroid 2017 AG-13 just narrowly missed the Earth by only half the distance between the Earth and the Moon at 4:47 a.m. The close flyby occurred only days after scientists at the Catalina Sky Survey first discovered the space rock on Saturday. According to scientists, the asteroid was not big enough to cause an extinction-level event, but warned that if it had entered the atmosphere near a populated area, there might have been damage similar to the aforementioned Chelyabinsk event.
What's being referred to as a once-in-a-decade storm is causing flood warnings, mudslides, wreaking havoc, to say the very least. We know at least 4 people have died in California as a result of these storms. Storms coming one after another, and we're told they may not let up until later this week. More than 1,000 homes, some 1,300 in Reno, Nevada, have been evacuated due to flooding threats. According to officials, Interstate 80 in Reno also closed because of a large mudslide. The mud and rock covering a huge section of that road. In some places, the mud as deep as 7 feet. In California, a giant sequoia that has stood for centuries has fallen. Tough not to remember this picture. You don't have to have visited the so-called tunnel tree to know of it. Officials say all of the rain may be the cause. Look at that. It was known as the pioneer cabin tree, or the tunnel tree. Reportedly, it was hollowed out in the 1880s so tourists could go through it.
An 85-year-old is credited with saving 2 women from a fiery crash. The man, who needs a cane to get around, saw the out-of-control car flip into his front yard. That's when he decided to ignore the flames and rush to help. Lynn Ann Wynn has that story tonight.
This is Lyndall Marbett. He's 85 years old, going on 86.
I was born April 15th, 1931.
He lives off FM 2738 in Johnson County with his caretaker and uses a cane to get around. And he's a little hard of hearing.
How much is the speed limit out here? What's the speed limit out here?
55.
But it was Marbett who jumped into action when two women driving along this curve lost control of the car and flipped over in his driveway, the car bursting into flames.
Car landed right here, and that's where it burned up, right here.
While his caretaker ran next door to call 911 and get help, Marbett tried to get the 22-year-old driver and her passenger out of the burning car.
When I got back over here this way, he was beating on the front windshield with a cane.
I got my walking stick and pulled it out and seen this woman's hand sticking out, and I got her and pulled her out.
Amazing, 85 years old, and drove her into the garage. I couldn't believe it, so he barely walk as it is. He has to use a cane to walk.
Marbett and his caretaker helped pull the other young woman out of the car and dragged her into the garage too. By the time firefighters arrived, both were safely out of the burning car. Even first responders were stunned.
For him to do that on his own was absolutely amazing.
If it wasn't for the gentleman to pull them out, it wouldn't have been a good turnout.
Department of Public Safety officials say speed was a factor in the crash, and both women have serious internal injuries, but are expected to survive.
You feel like a hero?
No, I just feel like an old man that tried to save somebody's life. I'd do it again if I had to.